at a point too where we're like, can we even stay in this city because it's becoming so expensive?
Artists are leaving, you know, I have friends moving to Hamilton.
Big bands didn't start from nowhere. They don't just show up and play at Massey Hall.
This is what Toronto's now familiar skyline looks like. The office towers don't dominate. Instead, it's expensive condos. And more are being built every year as people flood into the downtown core, driving up the cost of owning a home and renting. But in many ways, it's artists who are also paying a price, running out of places to play. In the last year, a number of the city's live music venues suddenly shut down. Some can't handle the steep rent increases. Others have been sold to condo developers. Justin Oliver used to own the Holyoke. 8 years ago, his rent was $2,000 a month. When it got to $4,000, it was lights out for good.
Holyoke is kind of a lot of things to a lot of different communities, whether it be people playing funk or jazz on a Tuesday or DJs. Sometimes we have big queer parties where people come and, you know, just express themselves.
The shift happened relatively quickly. Seemingly in a blink of an eye, rent prices soared in the city. Cheap neighborhoods suddenly gentrified, and small venue owners began to throw in the towel.
People that basically work their jobs, go home, watch TV, and have kids and whatever. They do their thing. Maybe a lot of them don't understand that, like, the people that are providing them with this richness of culture, it starts somewhere, you know. It doesn't just appear. It starts in places like this, or like Double Land, or the Transac. And without them, you know, the arts are suffocated, and cities become really boring.
Toronto used to be boring. Its nightlife was considered tame in comparison to many cities its size. But in the 90s, that changed. A vibrant club culture began to grow, and it spread.
What is your name, sorry? Jess. Jess Rose.
That's when Rosina Kazi moved to the city.
When we grew up, we came out of the 90s sort of hip-hop scene and house music scene, and there was just so much more DIY stuff. There was warehouse parties. Stuff was affordable. You could live here and work part-time.
She and others flocked to the city's core. Rob Squire, aka Prison Guard, became a fixture of the underground hip-hop and electronic music scene. He's a barber by day and a DJ by night.
Literally look at any of the stuff that used to be where Liberty Village is now, and that was where the entire after-hours scene of Toronto existed for the most part, right through all the way to the East End. You know, like there was the biggest clubs in the city.
But now artists are being pushed out of what used to be cheap industrial areas.
I know we'll find a way.
Many have moved away or called it quits.
It's kind of all over the place. This is a techno collection that I bought off of some other Toronto DJs that have stopped playing because they're so frustrated with the landscape of it.
We've just seen it become so expensive, particularly for artists, for folks who don't have a ton of money. I think we're having a reverse of like when poor and working class and immigrant folks and artists lived in cities, and then people lived in the suburbs if you had money. So we're actually seeing the shift of that. So I kind of laugh about it to be like, we're just gonna move to the suburbs.
Essentially, the creative people that make the city interesting aren't making a lot of money. They're relying on, they have like service industry jobs, they're relying on grants, and like they can't afford $500 for a small studio.
To fill the gap, artists started to turn to DIYs, spaces not necessarily built to be music venues, like warehouses, lofts, or art galleries. They're much cheaper and vital to the fabric of the creative scene. DJ and promoter Aiton Tobin holds events in these spaces.
A lot of these shows are experimental or just like supposed to be the kind of dance parties that you lose yourself in, and I think that kind of vibe, it cannot be achieved in most of the venues.
Some of Canada's hottest acts started in DIY spaces, like Grimes or Arcade Fire. But as old warehouses are sold to developers, many DIYs have been forced to shut down too.
For all my bands, for Hooded Fang and for Phaedra, we were able to thrive and get you know, I had like a start in our musical careers because of DIY spaces. You know, a lot of larger venues are more concerned about drink sales and attendance. When bigger bars have no room for us to play, or have never heard of us before, it's these smaller DIY spaces and grassroots venues that have like taken us in with open arms and have housed us and fed us and like showed us around town.
I mean, the consequences of not nurturing that sort of cross-cultural dialogue or creating safe spaces for people of color or the gay community or trans community or super straight community being able to nurture ideas is that you end up with like very homogenous culture. And unfortunately, that's what I feel is happening in Toronto. You know, when you look at rap music, the biggest purveyor of street culture is a child actor from Forest Hills. Like, that's crazy to me, you know?
Most large growing cities face similar challenges. In the last 5 years, London, England, lost nearly half of its venues to gentrification, and because of stricter zoning and noise rules. It has since loosened those rules and introduced a slew of measures to facilitate the creation of new venues.
I think we'll become closer to what Vancouver is right now and just open up a lot of space for condo building and restaurants. And one day we'll wake up and like a large part of Music City, Toronto won't exist.
Toronto, however, isn't there yet. It's just starting to study the problem, let alone do anything about it. Any potential solutions likely are months, perhaps years away. In the meantime, it's last call for many acts like these. Natasha MacDonald-Dupuis, CBC News, Toronto.